Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Family Treehouse, a podcast series brought to you by Storied, where I chat with people who have a passion for genealogy, storytelling, or both. I am your host, Heather Haunert. And one of my favorite things about the podcast is finding guests for the show. And even though a lot of our guests are very tied to the genealogy field, I love that they bring such different perspectives. And today's guest is no exception. Super excited today. I am chatting with Jenny Hawran, and Jenny's website, like Herding Cats, is phenomenal. Her blog posts are a must read. She's a tremendous writer. Like I can't your writing, like I want to share it with the world everywhere because it is such great writing. And if you are part of the NPE community, and for those of you that don't know, that's the not parent expected community. Honestly, even if you're not, her posts are just fantastic. You need to read them. So, welcome, Jenny. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, I think we're all going to learn lots. So I'm super excited to get started. So Jenny, first, why don't you just start by telling us about your background and how you really got started in the field of family history?
Yeah, so I grew up in Connecticut, still live in Connecticut, and I started family history research when I was about 15, so many, many, many years ago. And it was actually my dad's father who got me, my granddad, who got me interested in it. And I just was enthralled by the old photos he showed me and talking about stories. I mean, he filled in a lot of stories. He wouldn't just show me the photos, he would tell me stories. And that was really, really powerful to me. And so I got the bug and I have been researching all this time. And I do work part time in genealogy, doing mostly Connecticut record retrieval. I do social media for societies and websites. I have a day job during the day in local media and television, so I get to help people tell their stories. So yeah, and it's genealogy is just been a huge part of my life, and
Yeah.
family history has been a big part of my life.
Yeah. I had to chuckle when I was on your website and there's a spot at the top where kind of like about you and it tells your day job, but I like it was I think genealogy nerd at night. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, we can all relate, sister.
Absolutely,
To that.
absolutely. I mean, I think we all wear a lot of hats, in
Yeah,
our life, and I happen to wear several, and I love them all.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Jenny, why do you think that storytelling is such an important part of family history?
I our stories really outlive us. They're defining about who we are, and they connect us to other people in our lives that in a way that is so different than just getting a vital record.
Yeah,
Gathering all that information is certainly very important to document who your ancestor is, or who you are, but to have stories to go along with it, it is how a person's character is fleshed out for you in,
yeah,
in a way that
yeah,
you just can't get any other way. And so it's so important, especially, in my situation as an NPE. It's really poignant because I going through the family research that I've done on my dad's side, and my dad is who I call my dad
yeah,
always.
yeah,
Um, I had many stories. I had built such a strong relationship with these people that I was researching, and knew their stories, and loved them, and felt I got my identity from
yeah,
those stories. And when you go through a situation, a traumatic situation, like in my case, all of that is gone.
yeah,
In an instant, it's gone. And you feel and immediately disconnected from these people that you built your whole identity on,
yes,
and their stories. All of a sudden, you can still see those stories. You can still love those people, obviously, but they're really not your stories anymore.
yeah,
And
right.
it is a heartbreaking thing to to have to face. And then you have stories of this new side that
Yeah.
people say, okay, you're related to these people now. And you say, okay, well, these are strangers to me. I haven't lived any life experience with these people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure they're very nice people, but I don't
Yeah.
know them. I don't know
Right.
them. And that you're kind of disconnected in two ways. And so that's why storytelling it really is to me the most important part of genealogy is because you feel that connection. There's no other
Yeah.
way to feel connected. There
Yeah.
really isn't.
Yeah.
So
And don't you think too? I think that with an NPE situation, the older you are, I think the more difficult it is because like you said, your whole life has been around um, who you thought your people were, and suddenly when it's not, it's so much harder. I think the older you are when you find out. And I love to a couple of things that you said that I want to come back to. I'm going to use this quote forever because I love it. It was fabulous. Stories outlive us. I think that is so true. Just being able to share that with other people. That's why I research people that aren't even my people sometimes. Because I'm
mhm.
like, I don't want your story to die. I want other
Yes,
people to know
yes.
it. And I think too that stories, it is that personal connection we have with people. But don't you think too, when you kind of flesh out those stories, Jenny, that you get a personality of a person?
Mhm.
I think you
Yeah.
really know who they are when you're writing that story.
Yeah, exactly, because that's what you're seeking too. You're
Yeah,
seeking to know these people, these ancestors on a level, on that kind of level, like you know them in real life.
yeah, yeah,
And that's
right.
what stories do. That's
Yeah,
exactly what stories do.
yeah. When I think about stories and writing those stories of ancestors, how do you, if records are sparse, how do you go about trying to build that story for those ancestors?
Yeah, and that's a really good question because that is a situation with me. Trying to research this whole new side. It's brand new. I mean, it's been a while, but I mean,
Yeah,
it's brand new when it happens, and you don't have a lot to go on,
yeah,
and so you might find some records, but what I have been doing, which has been helpful, is you find where those people are in that community, and you try to build stories around what is happening in that community, whether it's
yeah,
through newspapers, which are fabulous.
yes,
A local historical society will have history of that community, things that went on in that community, local biographies. And you really have to rely on, the fan system, the friends and
yes,
neighbors, and try to build that connection to these other people to try to flesh out who your person is. And
yeah, yeah,
it's challenging, and it's and in a sense also is it's not as gratifying because um you're not you're not getting the true story of who your person is, but
yeah,
you kind of have to settle for what you get. It's
right,
just what it is. And
yeah,
it's frustrating, and it's sad, and it's but it's kind of what it is. That's
yeah.
that's what it is.
And I think that not enough people really focus on that fan system. I think they kind of, see themselves at that brick wall, that dead end. They can't find their person and they just stop there. And I think there can be so many valuable things you can find with, looking at the people that were around them and in their community for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just really the only way to do it, and
Yep.
then maybe other records will come, based on those people who were a neighbor or a witness of their probate, and
Yeah.
that's just the way to do it.
Yeah. I think this is an important question, especially being an NPE. How do you handle sensitive and challenging stories when you're researching?
So this just actually happened to me. So I'm about 9 years into my my discovery.
Hmm.
and I am researching my tree, my new tree, and I think that I have stumbled upon another NPE situation. I'm trying to connect this one person to me, and I'm looking at the DNA, and I have corresponded with this person saying, "Hey, do you have
Mhm.
these names in your tree?" And she's like, "No, I don't." And I'm looking, and she's showing up as a second cousin to me, which is not that
Mhm.
far removed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And about 2 weeks ago, it just sort of hit me, and I was like, it's either her father or her grandfather is an MP. There's
Yeah.
something that isn't
Yeah.
lining up here.
Yeah.
And I had to sit down and think to myself, do I tell her this? Do I not
Mhm.
tell her this? I don't have enough evidence yet to
Yeah.
100%. I'm not strong on
Yeah.
DNA. DNA and I don't get along very well. I mean, so I wouldn't trust my DNA
Yeah.
analysis. I plan when I go out to Roots Tech this year to talk to someone who does know DNA very well. But
Yeah.
I mean, I just told I said no. I've had enough DNA. Thank you very much. Don't want to sit in classes. Don't want to do any of that. Thank you very much. But I'm like, no, this seems really obvious.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, so I think from my perspective, how would you break that kind of news to someone?
Yeah.
And the way that it was handled, well, I discovered it myself,
Yeah.
but I think what was also difficult for me was reactions of other people when I discovered this, and who kind of didn't mean to, but kind of invalidated a lot of what I was feeling.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
made it worse for me
Yes.
and
Yeah.
said a lot of, platitudes, your dad's still your dad. Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
It it is such a traumatic thing to go through this, and it is so mind blowing to go through this when you don't want people to tell you how to feel.
Yeah.
You just
For sure.
listen. And
Yeah.
so in this situation of an MPE, I'm going to talk to my DNA friends, and if I do see that it is most likely, then I I think I will reach out to this person. She's about my age, and like you
Yeah.
said, I mean, going back to this, it it is so much harder at this age
Mhm.
to find out
Yeah.
this information because most of the time, some of the time, people are gone who can tell you the
Right.
whole story.
A
In
hundred percent.
my case, my mother was still living, but my dad had passed away. My biological father had passed away,
Hmm.
and you've lived a life already.
Right.
You've lived a life being a certain person, a certain identity.
Yeah.
So, I think I'm going to ask for a lot of advice, from the professionals about how I should approach this. Should I
Yeah.
approach this?
Yeah.
Is this, I don't know this person like in real life, and is it
Right.
my place to tell her? I can tell you that, um, when I first discovered this, for a very, very long time, I just wish that I had never
Yeah.
taken this test.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
thinking I could have lived the rest of my life
Yes.
and been totally happy in oblivion. But I have children, and
Yeah.
my
Right.
daughters, somewhere down the line, it would have come out. And I
Yeah.
felt like this was meant to be, that I found out because I could provide the stories to
Right.
my daughters. And if it had come out after I was gone, they would have never known the stories. And then
Right.
it just evolves and evolves, them not
Yeah.
knowing their stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's why stories are so important. It goes back to why stories are so
Yeah.
important.
For sure. I think about a lot before, DNA was strong and in the field. I mean, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, how often this probably happened.
Right.
And nobody ever knew,
Nobody
because
ever knew.
because of that. So
Yeah.
this is a new question for me to ask somebody, and I'm like really excited about this one because I just love thinking about my ancestors and talking about them. If you could meet one of your ancestors in person, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Well, it seems obvious that I would want to meet someone on my new paternal side. And I do. I have a couple of answers with that, but I would definitely want to meet my biological father's father. Um,
Mhm.
so my biological grandfather,
Yeah.
because my mother did know him and had a few stories about him
Hmm.
that if there's any feeling of identification or feeling connected, it is through this grandfather. My mother told
Okay.
me a couple of funny stories,
Yeah.
and I got it. Like I got him,
Yeah.
and I was like, I would really love to sit down and talk to him,
Yeah.
because I feel like that we had some similarities,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and and on my mother's side, there's definitely there's a character on my mother's side who I had a lot of stories from my grandmother would tell me it was her father, and he just had a lot of wonderful quirks about him that I
Yeah.
would love to sit down and talk. I don't necessarily want to sit down with someone to learn about some deep dark secrets. I kind
Yeah.
of want to get
Yeah.
their vibe. I want to
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to know them on that level, and that's
Yeah.
why I would
Yeah.
choose those people.
Yeah. I love that. Get their vibe for sure.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. Sometimes we can dig up those secrets, but you can't kind
yeah,
of get
yeah.
that personality. Yeah, for
That's more
sure.
important to me.
Yeah, I agree. Um, Tell us, Jenny, share this. I love favorite part. I love when people share a favorite story that they have that they've, kind of discovered or uncovered. What is one of your favorite stories?
So, well, this is on my dad's side. His uh, grandfather. So this guy was missing from the family. My grandmother grew up without a father.
Yeah.
He left the family when and her sisters when she was about I think around 9 or 10. And it was
Mhm.
very mysterious. He
Mhm.
went to work. She lived in the Pennsylvania area, and he was an engineer, and he said, I'm going to New York City to find work. And this was in the early 1900s, and never heard from him again. And everybody's like, oh, he must have died, and he didn't have any identification. And they sent out, all kinds of things in the newspaper saying they were
Yeah.
looking for him. Well, 100 years later, I'm doing research on him, and I find him in California, buried in California. It was 3 in the morning. I'll never forget this. And I said, this is him. This is definitely him. And I did a little bit more research on him. And what I found out was he ran off with
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
and started a new life. And my grandmother, unfortunately, was gone at that point, but
Yeah.
there were a lot of cousins who kept that story going that, oh, he
Yeah.
disappeared and he must have met, a terrible death kind of thing. And I'm like, no, he went off and he had a different life. He had a child with someone else. He made his way over to California, and
Wow.
that's where and so it's just the reason why I would say it was one of my favorite or interesting stories was that it was just such a mystery for all these years.
Yeah.
And to be able to kind of just say, we found you.
Yeah.
Kind of just
You
kind
didn't
of,
get away.
yeah, just kind of fun. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I got a lot of good stories.
Yeah, that's a good one. I do our social for Storied and for Newspaper Archive. And one of the social posts I do every week is like a person from the, late 1800s, early 1900s that went missing all the time. I mean, it blows my mind how people went missing. And I do try to do a little research and find out about them. And so often that is exactly what has happened. They've run off with somebody and built a new life. So,
It was so easy to disappear
oh
back
yeah.
then too. Obviously there was, it just was just so easy to be able to even go by a different name. He actually kept his same name. He just kept changing his birth date and his birth year. His birth date
Yeah.
was the same, but then he filled out a social security form, and he put his real parents' names. And I mean, it was just, he's probably tired by then.
Yeah.
He was near the end of his life.
Yeah.
He's like, whatever, if they find me, yeah,
They
that's
find me, they
fine,
find me.
whatever.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's a good one.
yeah,
That's a good one.
yeah.
Um, Jenny, what advice do you have for people that are beginners that feel just overwhelmed about starting that family history journey? I think we get that kind of question all the time at Storied. What is it that they can do just to get started?
Yeah, and the thing that I tell people who ask me about that in my own life is that don't overthink it. You
Mm,
know, you you don't have to get the latest app, the latest this, the latest that. You don't have to do that.
yeah,
A lot of the things that are out there are so wonderful because they help you. But if that is just too much to wrap your head around, maybe you're not technical, get out a piece of paper, get out a notebook, and start with yourself. You know,
yeah,
I think one of the things that people tell me is they're like, oh, they're looking at their grandparents, their great grandparents, and that's great, but you really should start with yourself because you have stories. You have
right.
stories. My daughters told me that's why I started my blog. Was my daughters, it's not that they weren't interested in the ancestors, but they're like, Mom, we want to know your stories.
Huh,
So I tell people, don't overthink it. Open the computer, open up a Word document and start typing, or take a pen and paper and start writing about your stories. And then work your way back, then
yeah,
say, okay, now I'm going to look at like memories with, that connect yourself to your grandparents and say, I
right.
remember this of my
Yeah,
grandparents.
yeah,
And looking for the research in the records and the vital records, all of that is, you can take lots of classes for that kind
yeah,
of thing. All of that is available, but I think the writing is what, the stories, I think, is what kind of overwhelms some people, because they, whether they know it or not, they really want those stories. They do want to capture those stories, but they feel like it's just so overwhelming. But I just say,
yeah,
don't overthink it. Just start with
yes,
yourself. Start with
yeah,
yourself and start just easy, you know.
yeah. I think too, people just get stuck on that, that has to be perfect, that
Yeah,
your grammar and your punctuation and,
yeah.
all just write it.
Just write it.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
super important.
yeah.
Well, Jenny, I just want to thank you for your expertise and your passion. I am super honored that you have spent time with me today. It just has been a pleasure chatting with you. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate chatting with you and giving an opportunity to share my story a little bit.
Love that. Yep. Thank you for that because I know that can be emotional. So thank you for
Yes,
that.
thank you.
Until next time, friends, embrace the power of your family's untold tales and embark on a journey of discovery. Let the ink flow and the words dance as you weave together the threads of your ancestors' lives. Start writing your family stories today and let their voices echo through the generations to come at story.com. Have a great day. And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Family Treehouse, where we celebrate the power of storytelling and preserving our family legacies. Storied is more than just a platform for sharing stories. Dive into those historical records and newspapers, discovering the hidden gems that bring your ancestors to life. Add branches to your family tree, connecting the dots between generations. Thank you for joining us on this storytelling journey. Your stories matter, and through Storied, they have the power to resonate across time and touch the hearts of generations to come. Keep uncovering your family's history and keep the spirit of storytelling alive with Storied.